My name is Andrea Kirkwood. I'm a professor of biology at the University of Ontario Institute of Technology. I'm an aquatic ecologist, so it's very fitting that we're outside here right by a pond that's on campus. I'm particularly interested in the tiny organisms that live in water, so algae and bacteria, because they play such an important role in how healthy our aquatic ecosystems are. I am interested in things ranging from pristine lakes up in cottage country and how healthy those lakes are, to urban creeks and ponds. I went to the University of Waterloo and majored in environment and resource studies and did a double major with biology. It wasn't really until I did my master's that I was introduced to real research. From that point on, I discovered that was my true vocation, was to do aquatic research, because that's where my passion lay. Stormwater ponds are basically designed to capture all of the runoff that occurs after a very heavy rain event in urban areas where there's lots of concrete and hard surfaces, so the water tends to just funnel right off the landscape. And rather than it going directly into rivers and lakes, it gets trapped in these ponds, and these ponds are meant to treat the water. Hopefully the plan is for clean water to actually flow out into creeks and rivers. So what my lab is doing is trying to determine, in fact, is the water cleaner, and is it contaminated, and is actually impacting local creeks and rivers that we see. So we'll be doing an urban creek study, Oshawa Creek, as well as the impacts of stormwater ponds to Oshawa Creek. And I have 2 undergraduate students who will be going out every 2 weeks with their boots on and with field equipment and lots of water sampling bottles. And we'll be starting at the headwaters, so the very top of the creek, all the way down to the bottom. There'll be 7 different sites, and we'll be collecting samples. The students will be using field equipment, and the students then will take all this data that they've processed in the lab, and for their honors thesis projects we'll be working on analyzing the data and writing up a thesis in the school year. The reason why we study algae is because algae grow so quickly and they respond really quickly to changing environmental conditions, whereas fish can just leave. If they don't like an environment, they just leave, and so it's difficult to know for sure why they're not there. Whereas with algae, especially those algae that are growing on the rocks, they just change their species composition. So you'll find certain algae that are very pollutant tolerant, and you'll find other algae that are very sensitive to pollution. And so by knowing this, we can actually make sense of how healthy the ecosystem is by using algae as what we call bioindicators of ecosystem health. Algae as a biofuel source is actually a very big and up-and-coming area of research. And so I have a graduate student who's working on isolating algae from wastewater treatment systems. So when you think about when you flush the toilet, that water goes into a sewage treatment system, and there's these big open lagoon type systems, or what we call aerated stabilization basins, and algae grow in them. And so we collect samples from these wastewater systems around the area, and my grad student Kevin, he isolated them and is investigating how much lipids they can produce for potential biofuel production. Because the end goal is to grow algae in wastewater. So instead of that wastewater going out into Lake Ontario, we can divert, hopefully, all of that wastewater one day to grow algae, and then the algae can be used to produce biofuels. Getting involved in your community, learning about the local water systems that are nearby, this is all free, but it gets you familiar and curious about aquatic systems. When you go to university, it's important to specialize in science. So you don't necessarily have to be a biologist. You can become an aquatic chemist or an environmental engineer. There's a whole variety of careers that you can go into that are all aimed at improving aquatic ecosystem health.